How I learn to recognize if I'm settling in an environment. What I've recognized is when I go into a workplace, a community, any sort of group, if there are, I've recognized there's usually a female who is friendly at first, but then becomes competitive and silent and avoids me intentionally. There's usually a man who is there, and while he'll keep his distance, he'll show some sort of interest, but won't make any effort to get to know me. And then there's a number of people below them where, because those are like the two heads of the environment or the workplace. But then there's people, either coworkers or people that are working below these individuals, and they usually keep their distance unless I make the effort to say something. And so I've learned to recognize where in a room, in a space, if it's requiring me to always reach out and make that effort and always say hello and get to know people, and where it feels like it's pulling teeth to get to know people, that is not my room, because that's requiring me to stay in an old pattern of always over giving and under receiving. So as soon as I recognize, okay, I'm always feeling the need to cross my line and I'm not getting an equal give and take, that's a reason to leave that environment. Another sign that I'm in the wrong room, so to speak, is when something finally happens where there's some passive aggressive abuse that's happening, some targeting that's happening, and there are times when I don't feel like I can stand up for myself. So if I don't feel like I can stand up for myself, that's not my room. But if I choose to finally push past that fear of mine and I decide I can no longer keep myself small to make other people feel big, and I do end up standing up for myself, I see how the leaders in the room address that. And are they backing me? Are they partnering with me? Or are they trying to blanket the whole situation in order to avoid it? Which means a blanket for me is kind of like when parents tell all the kids to just behave. When in reality, what you don't understand is like Johnny's been kicking Susie under the table during the whole dinner time. But the parents are like saying, just everybody behave, because they don't actually know how to recognize what's going on. They're too stressed out. Maybe they just don't care. It's not their problem. They're not being targeted. It's the group of children amongst the kids there's targeting, right? And so that's where I've recognized that in workplaces where bosses have done the same thing, where I brought issues to their attention, where there's been like emotional abuse happening within the workplace. And, they just like to, it kind of minimize it, dismiss it, make it go away. It's not their problem, but it is their problem because it's on their work floor and it's on their property, right? So I've seen that happen, but I've also seen it with moderators in a group where, they're very selective, and they consider any sort of conflict like they got to shut it down. But what they're not understanding is like somebody standing up for themselves and then you erasing that whole conversation is minimizing and hiding, and it's actually creating a lack of support for that individual who has just learned or is learning how to stand up for themselves. And then because they don't like the idea of like conflict and not happy faces in the community, that they're like, oh, that's negative, we have to close that off, we have to erase that post. When in reality, they let that person stay in the group because all her other posts are happy and smiley, and she's part of the community. She's just so happy. And the reality is she's passive aggressive. She's targeting people. She uses large words. She types a bunch. So her targets get lost in the language and then have to, close themselves off because they feel overwhelmed. And that's what she does. And so when you have these people in the room, it's also usually she does this because her emotions have got the most of her. Like she's usually, something happens. I've been targeted a number of times in workplaces, and now recently on an online community group where I was promoting myself and I was moving with my confidence to go for a goal for me and build something for myself, and she felt less than, and so her emotions she got triggered and came out of her lane and into mine. And she tried to do it in what was considered like a calm and collective sort of state, but it's still passive aggressive. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't recognize it for what it was. They don't want to. They don't want to look too deep into it. And even though I had some backers on my side, my post was removed, which is what that woman wanted. That woman wanted me out of her room, so to speak, out of her environment, because I was making her feel small. And the only way she knows how to make people feel big is by targeting them and making them, trying to humiliate them, intimidate them, and try to shrink them, right, through those methods. And so for me, those are not my rooms. I'm not going to stay and fight there, because for me, that's me doing all the work, receiving very little reward. That's not my soul tribe. That's not the people I'm going to work with. The people I work with are like-minded, and they can recognize that behavior because they've gained the experience. They put themselves in challenging situations in order to grow and develop themselves. And so they can see that, because they can see it within themselves, and they can see it within her, and they can see it within the group. And then you can also see like where you have this female, this father, and then you see this competitive sort of peer or coworker, and then you also have, what you're also going to find is a very passive masculine who pretends to be, for everyone, is really for no one. And what they do is they end up still backing the bully. And so when I recognize this in a room, and you know what, I'm just like, because it's life is uncertain, and so you're just like, you just don't know, is this it? And that's how I've gained my experiences. So like putting myself, like trying trial and error, like, is this it? And every room I've recognized, I'm picking up a pattern. This is happening, every sort of pattern this has happened in my life. It's also showing me how this is my family dynamic growing up. And so where I wasn't able to see my family clearly, I'm seeing it in these other people in my environment, in these workplaces, and in these communities. So then I'm also able to get more clarity on the reality of who my family really was. And so it allows me to close those doors and, clear up any emotional connections that I did have. And now I no longer experience that. Another thing, what I've experienced this each time, when I first started out speaking out for myself, it was a lot. I was, because of what happened, not only someone touched me in one of my private places in a workspace, and it's not a lack of communication. I'd been telling this person so many times to, like, give me space, stop touching me. I don't like to be touched. Like, there's no sort of confusion about him and my boundaries. And so he just decided to go for it one time. And I think he felt entitled to my space and my body. And because he'd been there for 30 plus years, like, it was his workroom. He thought, I can do whatever I want. You can't tell me how far to stand away from you. I'm the engineer. I get to decide, and like, it's, because he made it seem friendly, he gets to decide, well, this is friendly touch, so I'm entitled to touch you friendly. No, you're not now. No, that's not allowed. But when I went to speak up on this, I had the product manager, I had the human resources back him, encourage him and support him, and look the other way when he kept doing this, because it did happen again where he was coming back around in my space, even though there were boundaries set up required by him, but those were ignored by him, by management. And so it got to the point where I finally had to advocate for myself and leave the room and leave the business. Like, I left once and came back, and then I left again. And I'm like, you know what? I don't need money that bad to put myself in that kind of danger. And like I said, there's a male, a female. The male did not get involved. He's the fun boss who likes to get attention from everybody. He uses his employees for attention and social interactions. And then the female, the product manager, she was doing the same thing. She would interact with the the employees, like mostly the senior employees, and they would gossip, and they would not check their work. Like, the people they're talking to, like, they did horrible work. Like, while they knew protocol, their skill set was really lacking. But that wasn't the attention, because like that product manager was looking for attention from the coworker, because she saw her as below her, and because she got special privileges when she kissed the product manager's butt, like, metaphorically. So or is that what and so so I had a number of, like, what seemed to like brother figures in that environment, a lot of men who, like, just kind of like rode the fence, and wanted to be considered a good person, but also they wanted to be seen as strong, but like they lacked character, they lacked integrity, they lacked morals and values, right? So when shit came to, what was it like when shit hit the fan, like they were nowhere to be found, except over on the bully side. And then I've had females in that same environment that were, as soon as I got in the room, they're okay when you're soft and naive, but as soon as you start showing some strength and capabilities and responsibility and accountability and value and skill set, that's when they come against you. And then but in the beginning, they're friendly because they're trying to get information because they want to marry you, and they're also trying to learn you so that they know the best way to target you. So like I don't have any friends right now, so like there were times I'm like, I wasn't ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed that I don't have friends. I'm okay with that, based on what I've been through in my past and what I'm experiencing moving forward. That's not a flaw. To me, it's a flex. I've been able to get here by myself, but a lot of people would see that as a weakness, and so they found it a reason to target me. And so I've seen this in a number of environments. It's a pattern I've picked up. And yeah, and so this will keep happening. The expectation is this will keep happening, period. So at one point I thought, I just have to learn how to stand up for myself so they don't target me. But I think they're always going to be out there. And that's my expectation moving forward. So I don't ever have to like put my guard down and be like, you know what? I just have to learn how to be like this. It's like if you live in the forest with bears, you have to expect that there's always going to be bears. And so you don't really want to be caught with a bear bell or a bear spray, right? Because you just never know when it's going to happen. And that's where I've kind of put my mindset in a way, because now it's like second nature and I'm prepared, and it's not going to be such a shock, because the shock, that shock and the what the fuck just happened, that's what sends me. That's what puts me into freeze, and then I have to process that and thaw that out. And the thaw for me is like an emotional release. That's exhausting. And so for me, I don't have to go that deep anymore. It's like the tip of the iceberg now. It's like recognizing it for what it is, acknowledging this is always going to happen. Yes, this is unfair. And a lot of times what I notice is when I experience these situations in these dynamics and I go to an exterior source for justice, like the police, like constables, like the justice system, like lawyers, they were failing me too. The adults that I ran into, they were tired in their job position. They were doing the bare minimum. They were doing it for the wrong reasons. They didn't feel strong to make a decision and be discerning. They didn't have those skill sets, and yet they were in these power positions, which is crazy to me. And that's something that was a shock too, like how many people are out there doing a job that they really have no right to be doing. I don't know how they got, well, I have ideas how they got there. I really don't care to delve into that, because like it's just accepting this is how the world is right now. Instead of feeling the need to change it, or I just have to learn how to maneuver through it, and recognizing like these people are not for me. And that, like I said, there are times when it would pull me deep into my emotions, and then I have to take more time to process it. And right now I just don't have time for that, and it's not that deep. And you know what? I've learned to recognize like these people are they're together, like they're gonna attract each other, and they're gonna repel the right people. And so they're gonna, it's like I don't know how to explain that. It's how you've ever heard that saying about the ants shaking the jar? It's kind of like that. And normally it's like an outside source that is shaking like us to fight against each other. I'm not seeing it like that anymore. I'm seeing like, I don't want to be in that jar with any of those ants, because they're like those fire ants, and it doesn't take much to set them off. And so like you don't even need to shake the jar. They're already pissed off. You just need to exhale and relax and do what you love, and like that's enough to trigger these ants. So now one thing I know, how I'm leveling up from these experiences and pushing past my previous growth. I've had it happen a couple times, and it's whenever I put myself out there in a group that like I consider to be my peers, and it turns out they're not. And the first time I did this was when I first did my cards and posted about my spirituality and the business I was creating online. And in my Facebook was full of coworkers, friends from growing up, friends, I use that term loosely, people I grew up with, just people that you kind of collect along the way, I guess, where it's not that deep. And the family they were in it too, and it was deeper for me than it was for them, which it's not that deep anymore, right? And so I remember the first time I posted, because nobody, like I told nobody about the spirituality. And so the first time posting it, oh, when was it? It was after I just quit my job at the post office. And it was like a couple days after that. And I didn't tell anyone about my leaving. One of my coworkers, she decided and took it upon herself to start telling people a week before I was leaving that I was leaving. Solely took that out of my, I didn't want to tell anybody because I didn't want to make a big deal about it, and I don't like goodbyes. And to be honest, I didn't really feel close to anybody. And I'm just like, you know what, if we're meant to meet along the way, you'll stay in my life, you'll make the effort, and if not, you won't. It didn't really, I didn't feel like deeply connected to people at that time. And so when I posted, like, I think I was hopeful at that time. Actually, I do remember thinking, like, I can see where what I'm learning, what I've learned, it can help these individuals. That's, I had hope for them, but I also could see where we weren't connected. Like, nobody had reached out to me. We hadn't connected while we worked there, and while we enjoyed each other's company, like on the job, and there were times when we would kind of go out together, I didn't make an effort, they didn't make an effort. And so I was just like, you know what, that'd be cool if they found it valuable. And like I said, I think it was over invested in the hope that they would find what I'm doing valuable, because I was really impressed with like what I had done, leaving the job, starting something new, having the courage to do that. I was already a single mom, I'd already done it by myself, you know, in relationships, and now I was going to try and do it in the work world. And so I remember when I posted that, I literally dropped to the floor in my bathroom, because I was in the bathroom when I did it, and I posted it, and I was like, I literally dropped to the floor and started bawling, because it felt so like out there, you know. I felt so vulnerable. I felt what is the exposed? I felt exposed. And I literally, and I was shaking, and I was cold. And what else did, oh, I had that happen. I know that I had that happen when I experienced a sexual harassment at a certain workplace in Tilsonburg. And when I was trying to advocate for myself, I was shaking while I'm talking, and I'm nervous, but I'm still continuing. I'm working through it. I'm not backing down. And so I know I experienced it at that time. And I also noticed when I was at my last workplace, when I was there, and I was trying to tell them about the fact that I was being stalked by a worker. And the reason why I didn't tell them is because the last time I told them about the emotional abuse I was experiencing from one of the coworkers, they wrote it off as girl fight. And so now all of a sudden, now it's on their floor, and now it's more, now it's serious. But when I told them about what was going on with emotional abuse of the coworker, it's considered personal. It's not that deep. But now that there is someone who I'm making a claim as a stalker, now they consider that, and they have to take that seriously. It's really selective, right? Because they're taking it seriously now, because now they can get me out of the building, right? They couldn't take the thing before seriously, because it was something that was being directed at me. And now that I was doing the accusing, and I was doing the, you know, that, then they found that was a good way for them to make me the problem and get me out of the building. And it's because the boss there was targeting me from the beginning. As soon as he realized I wasn't who he thought I was, and he thought I was just naive, he thought I was pliable, he thought I was controllable. And as soon as I showed him the opposite, and actually how hardworking and how much of a hustle I had, and I wasn't willing to be treated like garbage, that's when things started to change in the way he treated me. And so it was in that moment where I'm facing two grown men trying to explain how I've been stalked, and them trying to tell me how they're trying to help, how to explain to me how I'm not. And I remember my hand was like shaking. There's no way they couldn't have seen that. And honestly, it's just like when I do that, it's just wild, because I'm just like, why do I go there? Why is it so shaky for me just to speak on the truth? You know, and then it brings me back to my childhood. Like, that's messed up. I wasn't allowed to speak up. I wasn't allowed to speak out. I was discouraged from that. That's pretty sad. You know, when you can't feel like you can speak on something. And it's not just because my parents were emotionally unhinged. There's more to it than that. There was more to it than that. There was like, anytime I spoke up, they dismissed it. They ignored it. They made excuses for the behavior. They swept it under the rug. They didn't take it seriously. They didn't take me seriously. And that's what's happening with all these scenarios, right? They're just not taking me seriously. And And then, so the last time that this has happened is recently, where I was posting my business, looking to advertise my coaching skills, or services, along with my YouTube channel. And someone came out into my lane, and it was passive aggressive, and she had a ill-natured intention, while she was trying to humiliate me in public and dismiss me in public and make me small and feel like I shouldn't go after my goals, but in between the lines. And so, I gave her a pass, and I over communicated, and then someone else was calling her out, because she was trying to show how close-minded she was. And then so I appreciate that, but then she started going after her, and I said, no, that's not okay. Like, that's I can accept, because I can see it when someone is like, you know what, I can accept that you're trying to minimize me and do this and this, and that's fine, for a minute. And then but she went after somebody where I felt like that person had put themselves on the line for me. And whether, I don't know if that's how they saw it, but that's how I saw it. So there's no way, like, after she started going after that woman, there's no way I'm gonna sit there. And I there's certain things I can be quiet for, because I can see through it, and there's other things I'm just not gonna ignore. And not only that, it wasn't just that. It was, you know what? Like, I'm so sick of people trying to dismiss what I do. So I saw that as a perfect example to showcase my skill set. And based on one paragraph, I could read this woman right through. And that was just the starting. I didn't even get started on her. I haven't showcased all my other skills of, like, working through all these other challenges that we as humans have. I just could call her out, and other people could call her out, I'm sure too. But I just took the paragraph that she had given me, and I could read it. There's already something I was feeling off about the paragraph when I was reading through it. Something already felt off. And then because of what I presented and how she reacted to the whole package, there's something that I recognized fell off. And I was willing to ignore it, and then it got to the point, and it also made me realize, like, so when I went through it a couple times, because I didn't want to lead with my emotion, but at the same time, I wanted to let her know that she was totally wrong. I totally saw exactly what she was trying to do and who she was clearly. And so I wrote it up, I revised it, and I sent it. And while I was doing that, while I was writing it up to respond, I was like, why is it so cold in here? And I had to go turn up the heat. And it was 69, which that's warm for me right now, because I'm in Canada, and it is cooler, but it's still getting warmer. So, and then I noticed the shaking when I was typing. I noticed the shaking in my hand. So it was cold, I was shaking, I was feeling a little off. And that was me pushing past myself, because there's no way I'm willing to tolerate this shit anymore. And honestly, it's starting to make me wonder. I want to do a video about this, because, or maybe this will be it, but I'm just starting to wonder now about triggers versus reactional abuse, because what I'm starting to wonder here is, like, I'm fine until someone comes into my lane, right? And a lot of people want to write that as, and I've had a therapist kind of refer to that as a trigger. I don't know that that's a trigger. I feel like I'm like, a trigger is something that we're sensitive to, right? But tolerating abuse is what makes you sensitive to it. So as long as I'm accepting this bad behavior, this entitled behavior, like, if they're not behaving in that way, I'm totally fine. I'm calm. I'm not in my emotions, right? Like, I have my own emotions I have to be accountable, where I'm not able to achieve what I can. But this is not that. This is somebody else's behavior that they're forcing into my lane, that they're forcing on me to intercede with. So is that a trigger, or is that reactive abuse? Because if they had better behavior, if they didn't have so much entitlement, if they considered other people's feelings, like, what is the opposite of it? That, like, all those things I described are qualities that a narcissist lacks, right? And because they're not doing the work, they require other people to carry that burden upon them. So is that a trigger, or is that reactional abuse? Because it's like they're just ignoring. I can't be the first person that they've come against that has told them this, right? Because I know that these characters go into blame, because I've gone into blame when I go into resentment, and I've been targeted, right? But I don't know that that's the same. I used to, like, convince myself I'm similar to these people, because I could see some of my behaviors within them, but they're very different. I internalize my pain, they project it. That's different. And while I've had situations like that, it's I can't say like, well, I've been jealous of other people. Like I said, I don't know that I've ever projected it onto them to come out of my lane. Have I isolated myself? Yeah, but that's because I didn't feel good enough. That's not because I want to put them down. When someone makes me feel that way, I'm like, I go in and I'm like, why do I feel that way? You know, I don't feel like confident enough to move with them, so I usually associate with a lower vibration that I'm matching at the time. These people are coming out of their lane for me. That's very different. That's very different than hiding and staying with, you know, a past past person, a past crew. So I don't know. This is something I'm looking into, but I just wanted to talk on it because I think it's important to talk about. And also, like, just like the body, you know, that you feel, the sensations, like the cold. I was like, I'm so cold, and I'm starting to shake, and but to me, I was just like, I can't, no, I'm not gonna undo this. And so when I posted that, it's interesting because like I got, my post got removed from the group, which is exactly what that one girl wanted, right? She didn't want me to be seen. So mission accomplished, but like, that's not my room, right? And so I'm not gonna fight. I'm not gonna like every week start posting there because I'm like, this is not my room. If the moderators of that group can't see how she is passive aggressive and targeting people of the group, she's always gonna be doing that. You know, they just literally gave her permission because instead of taking time out to look at it, they're just, it's too much. I can't handle it because they're not handling their own shit, right? So now this is too much. But they've taken on this responsibility. It's their job. There are people that are in jobs that are taking on these responsibilities that are totally incapable of taking care of them, taking care of their crew. And it's interesting because that's the thing. These people have had this is in these dynamics, this is their bosses and workplaces where it's repeatedly happening. And then I just had this stranger who stood up for me for a moment and I felt protective over her. So do you see what I'm saying? Like, I used to put myself in the same group as these people because they're wounded and I'm wounded. We're very different. We're very different because I could even be protective over the predators because I can put myself in their shoes to a certain degree, right? And there's some places where that the shock comes because they do things where I'm like, I would never do that to a person. Like, I don't care how low I felt. I've been made to feel super fucking low, let me tell you, for a very fucking long time. And the behaviors that they have, I would never choose to do that. Never. That is something I'm just like, I don't know. And while I did some pretty dumb things in high school, a lot of them were self-inflicted. I wasn't a great friend. I did things to impress other people. Those weren't kind, but those were in high school. I'm not normalizing that. But based on my lack of attention and guidance from healthy, balanced, stable parents, that would be, I would expect that. But like, through my own life experiences, I've been able to recognize where like, okay, like this is not working. This is not okay. I have to do better. But usually it's because I can't stand my own environment, but it's also because now I'm being targeted by these people. These people have not even gotten to that point. They're still in high school. Something has kept them in high school where they can't grow past that stage. And like, while they can have a house and a mortgage and a full-time job and even a successful position, the fact that they have not developed past that point to develop like empathy, like they're still stuck in this mean girl era, or guy. But it's entitlement. It's kind of like thinking I'm a teenager so I can get away with this, you know? I'm a teenager so I can use that age thing as an excuse. And like, that's what we can to a certain degree, right? Like, but at some point there's something where the behavior, these shadow aspects, like while they're developed in childhood. So what is childhood, like, you know, 0 to 20 years, at some point we have to release them and recognize like, we can no longer behave like this. And that's where the narcissist, it feels like they're developed because it's just like they're not willing to put themselves in uncomfortable situations and self-reflect, and they're great at giving advice. They're great. That's why these people are in some of these positions, because they sound confident. They're great at giving advice, but they're not great at self-reflecting. And unfortunately, they use large words. They like large paragraphs. They like to use loud volumes, and they like to use words like they like to make it sound like as a group, like they're speaking on behalf of a group. I've had that too. I've had my neighbor try to do that. She'll make statements like everybody thinks you're a bitch. I'm like, I don't talk to anybody. Nobody knows me for me. So that is a lie. And if there's any truth to it, the people that you're talking about are people that I've had to set boundaries with because they have bad behavior. And I was never interested in connecting with them as long as they're behaving like that. So that's not a loss for me. That's not a loss. And so when I learned to pass myself through these experiences, what it's allowed me to is not only like flex my muscles and spread my wings, so to speak, like get good with advocating for myself, because not only did nobody teach me how to advocate, I was literally bullied and targeted in my family home. So it makes sense that as growing up in my environment, that's what I was attracted to. That's what I moved towards because that was my norm. And so when you recognize that and really truly accept that, I've already grieved a lot of this because it's not the first time, but it's just kind of like a, wow, that's really what this was. Like when you get good with looking at the painful truth and not trying to make excuses for it and not trying to move away for it or unsee it, and try to like, oh, maybe this and maybe that, maybe they're just, maybe they're struggling. I'm struggling. I'm literally have wave after wave after wave of bullies since I was a child. I'm struggling. Fuck you and your feelings. Because those feelings are full of shit. And they're based on like a victimhood that you've placed everyone else in, and now you're claiming to be yourself. It's like they've got this victim card, and yet they're the ones that are the bullies. And so when I recognize this, um, I'm less invested in them, because it's an expectation. You know what? Am I always going to grow? Yeah, I'm a grower. That's what I'm going to do. And so it makes sense. I'm always going to have these people coming at me. And so like, I had to learn that, while it's disappointing because these are humans, they're inhumane. And there are inhumane humans. And that's just like, I am perfectly imperfect, but they're inhumane humans. These are not the same people. While we share the same similar traits, and bad habits and behaviors that we're having to refine, they're for different reasons, they're by different causes, and I am not the same as these people. And realizing that is helping me to separate myself from that, and I'm no longer invested in their wounding, and I am moving through mine. I've gotten to a really good place, and I've learned how to do that, and that's part of what I do, and that's how I got here. And so I just try to speak on like what I recognize while I'm going through it and what has helped me. And so now I'm at the point where, so before I wasn't very good at this. Is I was like I said, I was getting caught in that it's a freeze state, but what it is it's a heavy burdened place where you're weighed down by these emotions because it's bad behavior coming from other people. And that's what I mean. They have no hands attached to it because they've got people who are backing them and make excuses for their bad behavior. So there's nothing they have to invest. They're fine. They're safe, right? There's no strings attached to this. Everything is put on you. There's no support for you. There's no recognition. The coworkers in that environment, they all turn against me within a second, so they were never for me. So like that weight that you're having to process after the betrayal is the reality of the situation that is heavy, and that you're having to acknowledge and process and move through, and recognizing like, wow, it doesn't matter how well I treat people. There are some people that are just ugly on the inside and always going to be negative to me. It doesn't matter how friendly their face is. It doesn't matter if they try to help me. There's still something, and I'm recognizing these people are quite fine hanging around the bully and connecting with them and Facebooking them. There's like a cooperative nature between the two. There's a lack of recognition about how damaging those individuals are. And so that's where I've learned to like really be okay with closing those doors and those connections, and recognizing like these people never had my back. They never will. They don't even have their own back because they've kind of sold their energy out, their sellout energy. And so in order to move from the freeze to start thawing, like that's what I had to process and move through it. And it's painful because it also gets you into feeling like this can happen when you've experienced it so many times. And before I would just kind of write it off as like, okay, those are bullies, big deal. I guess that's bullies. But when I started to recognize it, like I thought it was maybe me and how I was behaving. And so I tried to be better. And I realized that didn't change who those people were. It didn't matter how many examples I showed them about how I could be tolerant of their wounding and that I was unconditionally loving towards them. That didn't help. And forgiving them didn't help. They still lashed out. They're still unkind. They're bad. That's why forgiveness doesn't change these people. Loving them more doesn't change these people. You know, they have to learn that. That forgiveness of self and self-love is an inside job. I would stay stuck in this resentment if I didn't learn how to forgive myself for ignoring the signs of basic respect. You know, these people are not kind people. They don't even know how to, that's the thing. These bad behaviors, I was accepting of them because I was taught to. And the longer I'm going to do this, the more emotions I'm going to be absorbing from these people, and because I'm required to carry it as long as I'm accepting it. And so like, well, I can't control people coming out of my lane, being on the highway. Like you're on the highway, you have to travel that highway. You can't always control it. And while you can take, you know, maybe you can take a less populated back road. Okay. But I had to acknowledge like how to be more protective of me and my energy and just keep my eyes more peeled for these people. And in doing that, it was recognizing that where I was too accepting of this bad behavior, I thought these people didn't know that they're doing it. Now I assume they know what they're doing, and that helps me not to tolerate the abuse. And so I stand up for myself. While I'm not being accepted like that, I'm also not tolerant anymore. And so while I'm not willing to tolerate it anymore, and invest in their wounding by providing them with love and forgiveness that they have not earned or deserve because of their behavior, I'm allowed to let go of that situation. And sometimes, you know, it sounds weird saying that, but the reality is, it's like I've learned when I put up with abusive behavior, I internalize that and I take it out on myself. And that's not fair. Not only am I required to carry their burden, I'm also doubling up and punishing myself for accepting and taking that on willingly without any sort of fight, any sort of like kickback, any sort of, you know, just quietly leaving. I don't mind quietly leaving an environment at times, but there are times where I'm just not going to leave quietly anymore. I watched this video on YouTube, and this guy was leaving his workplace, and you know what? It's the small disrespect that deserves a loud recognition, because otherwise it turns into 1,000 cuts that are lead to you know, disease, illness, financial ruin, you know, deeper and darker things than that. And so I had to learn how to stick up for myself. Nobody taught me that. My parents didn't know how to do that. They didn't teach me that, but they also were, you know, because they didn't stick up for themselves, they became the bully themselves, and they use their children to empower themselves. And that's not how it works. So that's not what that connection is meant for, to make you feel big and them feel small. That's not what that's for. And so I've gotten really good at recognizing these patterns. And like I said, it's helping me. Now I don't have to grieve. Now I don't have to release any emotions because I didn't take them on. They're not mine. That's not my problem. I don't have to stay in that room. I don't have to coddle that person. That's a her problem. That's no longer me problem. And that's how I work through it. So hopefully that's helpful. If you have more questions about that, let me know. I'll add more to it and or answer your questions. And yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. And I hope this is helping you. I know the most important thing was when I could slow things down. It gave me a time to recognize them, you know, to pinpoint what's going on. Where's that coming from? But when I'm racing into rooms and then like crashing out, it's like there's a lot going on and it's so chaotic and I can't see what's happening and from who and where. But when I decided to give myself permission to slow down in life, not focus on material gain at the time, but interior health, internal health, that really gave me permission to rest, permission to grieve, and permission to pay attention to the red flags that I was avoiding intentionally. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say for now. Hopefully that helps, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.